screw the tax credits. Like, you guys are going to do our work for us. If you triple the price of power, go ahead, force us to work on our cost stack and become even more efficient and even more adept at delivering low cost solar and see how that pans out in the long run.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and I'm joined by a full panel this week. Let's say hello to everyone. Welcome back, Zach.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We've also got Mary James with us again this week. How are you, Mary?
Very good. Nice to see you.
And over in New York, we've got Jay is hanging out with Michael. How are you guys?
Doing great, Michael.
A lot of fun. It's great to hang out with Jay. It's always fun.
Yeah, Jay, what you've popped up in Michael's office there. You're on a bit of a road trip.
I did, yes. And I stopped in earlier today. I was at the 475 headquarters in Brooklyn, doing a little tour there about an article, but that will come out later, probably sometime in early to mid-September. Let's hope.
Nice. Well, it's great to have you on the pod this week, Jay, and a really great interview talking about solar this week, and very topical that you are in New York, because that's a big part of the conversation is how to get solar onto some fairly challenging rooftops and flat roofs, which I found very interesting. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, we've got a few people to thank.
We do indeed. So I want to thank our sponsor of the week, European Architectural Supply. And a big thank you to European Architectural Supply for making all of our programming happen here at Passive House Accelerator this week, including this episode of the Passive House podcast. Thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thanks to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Thacro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050.
All right. Well, let's get straight into it because I love the origin story for SolarWorks, Brooklyn SolarWorks, that Galen explains how they all got started. So let's jump into your chat, Jay and Mary, with Gaelen McKee from Brooklyn SolarWorks.
Hello, my name is Jay Fox. I am the co-host of the Passive House podcast. I'm here with a fellow co-host, Mary James. And today we are speaking with Gaelen McKee, the president and founder of Brooklyn SolarWorks. Galen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Got it. All right. Well, let's launch right in here with before starting Brooklyn SolarWorks, what was your background? Were you always into clean tech and energy, or did you come from a different background?
I was well on my way to kind of being a degenerate ski bum. I had a fallback plan of like opening a pretty sweet sandwich shop. But life has a way of taking it in different directions. So I did an undergraduate degree in geology, and then I was living in Montana, enjoying the mountains, thought I would go to grad school in Montana, but then all my cool friends were in New York City playing music. And so I got itchy feet and I came to New York and ended up applying to grad school here, and never assumed I would be living in the city for now 17 years, I guess. And after grad school, just started worked for a couple solar companies, and then I have two business partners, Mark Cunningham and TR Ludwig, and we were all working for another solar company called Sunrun, big national residential leasing company, and driving all over the place. And honestly, like we were just so sick of driving around, living in Brooklyn, driving up to upstate New York, out to Staten Island, and passing up all these houses in the city that we just figured we might as well try to try to sell some of these people in the city solar. Sunrun wouldn't touch flat roofs at the time. There was obviously a lot of flat roofs in New York City, and so we figured we'd give it a go and try to sell folks solar such that we could ride our bikes to the sales consultation and ultimately the installation. And yeah, lo and behold, it worked. I remember like one day, it was right when we were getting going. We lined up like three or four consultations and all on bikes. We just like rode from one house to the next, got like a $1,000 check deposit, rode to the next house, like chatted for a while, got another deposit. And at the end of the day, we're just like, holy moly, like we just got like $4,000 on our bicycles. Like this is great.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. And
Is
now we've
that
got like
the
80 have to have like a no bike policy because of insurance. So I don't know. Like there's pros and cons to success. I
Yeah.
don't know.
but that's quite a company origination story there. And how long ago was this that you started Brooklyn SolarWorks?
10 years as of February 2nd, 2015.
Wow.
We were all still working for Sunrun at the time, don't tell them. And we're yeah, we're just like sitting in some coffee shop in like Clinton Hill or something. And it was like sleeting, and we're just like, all right, let's just do it. Like, what do you want to be? TR's like, I want to be the CEO, I guess. We're like, fine. Mark, what do you want to be? He's like, CTO. I was like, great. Like, Galen, what do you want to be? I'm like, I want to be the president. So, with absolutely no experience and just based on the fact that it sounded sweet, I chose that title, and somehow they've let me keep it.
Well, that's great. And you mentioned flat roofs. So your company is tackling sort of the unique uh, buildings in New York City and the unique solar situations. And one of those is the canopy concept. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to making solar work in Brooklyn and what is the canopy concept?
Definitely. So the canopy, is not a unique concept to ourselves, but the canopy in New York City solves a few issues, one primarily being related to New York City specific fire code regulations. And what that means is for flat roofs, technically roofs below, I think, 12-degree pitch, you need these setbacks. You need a pathway from the front to the back that's 6 feet wide, and you need another pathway from one side of the roof to the other side of the roof that's 6 feet wide, all 9 feet tall. And then you need setback space around hatches and skylights, vent pipes, stuff like that. So, if you can think of your typical New York City row house, brownstone as we call them, they're roughly 16 to 20 feet wide by 30 to 50 feet deep, and the average being somewhere around 17 feet. And so if you take a 6 foot swath of that away, front to back and side to side, and then 3 foot perimeters around a lot of those obstructions on the roof, you really start to limit the area where you can put panels. And so if you go 9 feet tall, the setbacks basically become moot because you're above them. So I guess the theory is you're a fireman and you can throw a ladder up and hop off your ladder and move around and swing an axe unobstructed if the structure is 9 feet tall. So knowing that, we just knew that if we could kind of design and engineer a repeatable kind of modular pre-engineered structure that met those requirements, we could take solar system sizing from, maybe a few kW to 7, 8, 10, 15 kW, and just really increase the system size and of course the power output as a result. So that was kind of how we started noodling on the canopy, and we actually tried to do it back in our Sunrun days. And Sunrun was a big company then even, and it was too much of a lift to get the powers that be to kind of sign off on such a new product. They had to keep it streamlined, go for the more traditional pitched roof installs. So when we left Sunrun, we engaged with Situ Studio, kind of local design and engineering firm here in Brooklyn. Great folks, super skilled, and they helped us kind of design our original design, kind of the canopy generation one. They helped us design it, and then we engaged with some structural engineers and this fabricator up in Rhode Island, who's still our fabricator to this day. And so, after a lot of renderings and some heavy math calculations, we landed on this design, and it's still pretty similar to what we build today to what it was in that first one that we built, but it turned out to be super adaptable to New York City rooftops, and really allowed us to kind of crack open the market and be able to offer folks just larger systems that will fully offset your average townhome.
Nice. And I mean, our townhomes kind of like the 1 and 2, maybe even 3 families, your primary customer base, or are you also getting into like some larger like commercial, either commercial buildings or like multifamily?
Definitely. Historically, yes, townhomes was the foundation, the bread and butter, and it still really is. We try to do 30 to 40 townhomes a month.
Oh wow.
But over the last couple of years, we've definitely started focusing more on getting some of those larger commercial installs. And that's all relative in New York City. Large commercial is, 50 to 200 kW. For a lot of folks, it's a lot bigger than that. But there's just limited roof space. But I think we ran an analysis of all the rooftops in the city, and it's something like, oh God, I've forgotten the numbers exactly, but it's like 80% is 50 kW and less. So there's hundreds of thousands of roofs in the city, but there's very few roofs where you can fit, box store style solar system. So you kind of have to optimize around that like 30 to 80 kW range for commercial in the city. And so we have been leaning into that market. We do a lot of co-ops, condominiums, and then kind of your true or commercial installs as well. And we're also, with the canopy, we've developed a lot of different, more ground mounted applications. So your traditional kind of cantilever solar canopy with a big post in the middle and two wings that go out on either side, and then we've even started doing a wood structure that's a little bit more aesthetically geared towards your classic colonial house. Some people don't want a big stack of metal in their front yard, so we've tried to give it a little bit more aesthetic resemblance to some colonial houses. So yeah, we're still cracking into the ground mount market in New York City ourselves as an installation operation, but our fabrication side of the business that just makes the canopies and primarily sells them to other solar installers. We've been having a lot of success there, and we're willing to sell canopies to anywhere in the US and even beyond if somebody wants to pay for the shipping.
Nice.
Wow. So you mentioned co-ops, and I was really interested to know how, because that's getting a lot of people to agree to solar if you're installing on a co-op building, isn't it? And
Yeah.
how do you make that work successfully? I mean, and is it possible to have like 20% of the residents want solar and 80% don't, but you can go ahead and accommodate the 20% who do?
You really hit the nail on the head with that question. It's like a running debate here, how hard we lean into co-ops or not because of that exact nuance that you just highlighted, the fact that you're really hurting cats. There's the board, there's the president of the board, and then there's all the shareholders of the co-op. In most instances, the board makes the decision. So, you tend to, like, we'll entertain anybody who calls in because we love solar. We want to give everybody solar. But if you get somebody who calls in from a co-op that's not on the board, we very quickly ask them to take this to the board and then convene a meeting directly with the board. And yeah, it can be very frustrating. We will do webinars, we'll meet them in person. You have to basically field questions from one solar system has six buyers, so you're answering six different people's questions. And at the end of the day, sometimes they move forward and sometimes they don't. A lot of the times it does take somebody who's an advocate who really believes in it, and usually they have to be on the board to kind of make sure the agenda's heard. But we've burned many, many, many hours on other co-ops, and they've just kind of gone dark on us, or for whatever reason have gotten it almost to the finish line and then told us it's just not in the fiscal budget. So it's kind of just part of the game. But it's hard to totally ignore, because if you look on Google Maps in some areas in Queens and and like Harlem and the Bronx, there's just like endless rooftops, and they're all fairly straightforward installations once you can get through the noise of the decision makers. And yeah, I don't know if somebody can kind of crack the code and figure out how to streamline the sales process, then it's game on. But it's also just a very attractive deal, because before our administration decided that they wanted to curtail solar and kill the residential solar tax credit, which ends at the end of this year, you're allowed to basically you can go solar as a co-op, and you can distribute the tax credit proportionately amongst the shareholders. So it ends up being a pretty good deal to do it through a co-op, because you can kind of pay through communal funds and then share the tax credits individually, both the residential federal tax credit and the New York state specific residential tax credit.
Okay. Is a state tax credit continuing on, or is that getting cut as well at the end of this year?
That carries on. We were hopeful that that might get increased, and spent a good deal of time trying to lobby Hochul to up it a little bit for us, but unfortunately it didn't get into the budget this year. And it's possible that it'll get in there next year, but to date it's I think it's on for at least 5 more years or something, and it's $5,000. So it's 25% of your system expenditure, capped at $5,000. But in a co-op scenario, it's $5,000 per individual asset owner, or share owner. So your $5,000 cap doesn't apply. Basically, every shareholder can take it up to that $5,000 cap. So in aggregate, it becomes a lot more.
Yeah.
Well, I guess co-op owners better get on board quickly.
That is right. That's absolutely right.
My future mother-in-law I'll need to tell her, because she's on the board. She's up on the Upper East Side. So they got plenty of roof space.
Can you talk a little bit about, like, your typical, if there is such, you said you do 30 to 40 installations on row houses, brownstones, whatever you want to call them. Can you just talk a little bit about the typical installation for that kind of building?
Definitely. So again, mostly flat roofs, at least row houses and brownstones, all flat roofs. We have two styles of systems that we'll do on a flat roof like that. One is the canopy, which is an elevated system, 9 feet tall. general system size for those is somewhere probably around 9 kW, and they can go much higher and go a little bit smaller, but they can go, to 15, even 20 kW. And the other style is what we call a tilt rack. That is built on a structure. Some may liken it to scaffolding. It looks kind of like we build a Schedule 40 pipe. So you have arrays that are tilted 20, 25 degrees, about a foot off the ground on one side and about 5 or so feet off the ground on the other side. So angled south to increase productivity. Those have to abide by the fire code. So those system sizes tend to be a little bit smaller, probably in like the 5 to 6 kW range. And so those are the two kind of styles that we offer. All the panels, obviously, on the roof. Then you have to run a conduit down to the electrical service. It's always in the front of the house in the basement. So we can run the conduit down the back of the house and through the basement, or we can run the conduit down the front of the house. And then we connect into your electric panel. Nowadays, we're using micro inverters. So there's all the power electronics for the most part are on the roof. Might have to add a disconnect switch down in the basement or just go in through a backfed breaker. But that's about it. So you've got the panels, the structure that supports the panels, the conduit that houses the wiring that runs from the panels down to the electrical room, and the micro inverters that sit behind the panels. In New York City, a lot of people are interested in batteries like the rest of the world. In New York City, unfortunately, it's still very arduous to get batteries approved by the powers that be, which are the building department and the fire department. So we are not currently offering batteries on a regular basis. It's a lot of work. We've gotten one battery system approved in our history, and that literally took about 6 years to do. So we're hopeful that things are loosening up there a little bit, and we can streamline that process and offer batteries to all our customers. But it's going to come down to some, there's some strict requirements, like lot size may play a factor where you can literally site the batteries. It's unlikely that they're just going to let you put them in the basement where we'd like to. So they're either going to have to be in the backyard or on the roof, and it's very hard to get the actual permits at the moment.
Is it any easier outside of the city? Like still in New York State, but just not in the five boroughs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the 5 boroughs are just subject to the, New York City Department of Buildings and the New York City Fire Department. And so that's as soon as you step across the border in Long Island, or as soon as you step across the border in Westchester or New Jersey, you can pretty much do residential batteries extremely simply.
And what percent of your work, do you avoid having to go that far? Are you still mostly within New York City, or do you work in a large
Yeah,
area?
we're pretty much exclusively in New York City. We will obviously sell our mounting structures to folks anywhere outside of the city. We might start entertaining larger jobs specifically that use our mounting structures within striking distance of the city, which is Long Island, Westchester, some areas kind of in the adjacent upstate
Yeah.
of New York, maybe Jersey, but for the most part, we're pretty much 100% New York City still.
And around where I live, there's a lot of schools are using, are installing PV systems. Is that something that you're seeing there also?
Uh, Schools are, government organizations or nonprofits, so they'll need to find another way to monetize the tax credits. There's a direct cash grant now for nonprofits, so they can do it, but it's usually a funding thing for schools. So in California, I imagine there's some grants. So if you're on top of it, you can get a grant, you can do solar, and it's probably pencils out pretty quickly. A lot of schools in New York City also do it, like the public schools. We have not done any of the public schools, but we've done a couple private schools. We put some panels on the Dalton school. We put some panels on the German school in Crown Heights. So I don't. It's definitely happening. We're not plugged into kind of the New York City public school network yet, but I'm sure it comes down to kind of a question of funding because solar does pay for itself pretty quickly.
Yeah. And are you doing, sorry to keep dwelling on like where these are going up, but like do you do a lot of parking lots or like green spaces kind of integrated into like a pergola or something that I guess would be a privately owned green space, or even any parks? Or again, do you run into the same problem where that's like a government agency, so it's a headache to deal with?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a headache. I mean, what we've done a lot of is community gardens. We have a program where we basically just donate equipment. We try to do it on a limited first come first serve basis, but we have done a handful of community gardens and projects that these projects are super fun and they're super cool, but they do end up taking up a lot of bandwidth. And every time you get approached by something like this, it's usually the parks department being like, well, we don't really have that much money, so we can't really pay you that much, but it's a pretty cool project. And it's hard to say no to those because we love a cool project. So,
Yeah.
we try to engage to the best we can. We had a canopy at the bandstand in Prospect Park for a while, just like charging people's cell phones. That was temporary, so it's not there anymore. We've done a few community gardens up in the Bronx and around Brooklyn. And it's the hardest one for me though, is like uh, when I see a cool project, and a lot of times I get a look at them, and I try to get the rest of the team involved, and like our head of ops or something. It's just like, we just really don't have the bandwidth like to pull this off. And so somewhat reluctantly, I tell them we can't do it, and then it gets built like a year and a half later and looks super cool, and I always get jealous that we didn't do
And going back to, since we are the Passive House podcast, the typical sizes that you talked about for brownstones, row houses, is does that how much what percent of their annual annual electricity use does it cover, and how much does that change if it's a passive house? And I don't know how many passive house buildings you've done.
I don't know exactly, but we've probably done like 10, 20, something like that. I'm basing this on the limited sample size of the folks that I do know. I have a house and I put a 10 kW system on my house, and it's a two family, so there's an apartment and there's a main house. It's not super huge, but it's fully electric heating and cooling with Mitsubishi mini splits, electric stove, electric hot water, and I have more power than I need. I'm probably more on the conservative side from a energy usage standpoint, but I don't go out of my way to turn off lights or turn off the AC. And 10 kW produces about 11,000 to 12,000 kilowatt hours a year here in New York City when it's not terribly shaded. And that's plenty for me. So a lot of the times we put a decent sized solar system on a passive house, but they tend to have higher consumption. So, where I might use 10,000 kilowatt hours, they might be using 15,000 or even double 20,000 kilowatt hours. And a lot of the times, I think we should be able to provide a full offset, but it does come down to people's personal habits and how they choose to use or not use electricity in their home.
Yes.
So if you gave us a blank slate, we should get pretty close to a full offset, but passive houses tend to also be fully electric and have higher consumption.
Okay. So it's like the heating and cooling goes down, but the toys go up.
Yeah, heating and cooling does go down, but it's all electric heating and cooling, which is great. But they also tend to be big houses. My house is like 20 by 30 feet. A lot of the passive houses, it's the full lot width, so 20 by 50 feet. And it's heating and cooling is by far going to be your biggest load. And nowadays you see that peak load in wintertime when you're heating with electric. So used to be your peak electrical load was July, August when you're cranking your AC. That's shifted now to December, January, February when you're trying to heat with electric. Now that's going to be your biggest usage months of the year.
And the lowest solar,
Yep,
but
definitely,
still,
and the lowest solar. Yep.
yeah, but still, I mean,
And then as we get electric cars too, not everybody, at least in New York City, has the luxury of being able to park in front of their house. Some folks do, but if you drive a lot and you have an electric car, it's just a relatively high consumptive thing. A car battery can be anywhere from 60 to 160 kWh, and if you drain that battery every day, you're adding a lot of load to your home.
of course. And have you guys ever worked on a passive house multifamily building, installed a system on a passive house multifamily building that you know of?
Good question. Off, you know, it's cheating a little bit because most houses in like the Brooklyn, New York area are technically multifamily because they've got 2 or 3 meters. So discounting those ones where maybe it is technically multifamily, but it's, they're living in the whole thing or they just rent one unit out.
Yeah.
Nothing is popping into my mind that it wouldn't surprise me if we have. I know we've probably done like a couple like 3 or 4 units. I don't think we've done anything that's like 20 units or above.
Okay.
We'd
And
like to.
Yeah.
yeah, and we'd like to see you do it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, most of our passive house interaction, and it's like any technology. When it's new, it's maybe a little bit more expensive. It's for the early adopters. Early adopters usually have to pay a little bit of a premium. So as it becomes more mainstream, and it just like permeates into people's mindset that this is how you should build. That's the same thing we deal with when we're trying to convince people to buy solar. It's an upfront cost for a long-term benefit. And
Yeah.
even if you take a loan out or just kind of fix the price of power, when we started this 10 years ago, and I was working in solar for years before that, even in New York City, the price of power was 20, 22 cents, something around there. And it's consistently, reliably now 40 cents or more. So we've basically seen the price of power double in the last 10 years. And there's no question that with pulling away solar subsidies and trying to promote fossil fuels again, renewables being the quickest thing you can bring online on the grid, you're just going to continue to see these rates go up. I think Con Ed just passed another 18%. The Public Service Commission of New York just approved another 18% rate increase for Con Edison.
Nice. Well, with all that
And
AI as well.
yeah, and like the data centers and people converting to more electric heating and cooling, like the demand for electricity is just going to go through the roof. And I think we're getting like the whole solar industry was extremely bummed for the last 2 months because we've just been getting assaulted by the federal government. And not only is it just kind of like taking away the subsidies and basically trying to impose tariffs and these kind of foreign entities of concern rules that prevent you from buying certain equipment, but it's basically you're just your government saying they don't want to support your industry anymore, which is just tough. You're like, all right, you guys don't think that this is a good industry to stand behind anymore. And so everybody's been a little bit downtrodden for the last couple of months. But it's funny, like slowly and slowly, everybody's just starting to realize, like, you know what, like screw the tax credits. Like it's you guys are going to do our work for us if you triple the price of power. Like solar doesn't even need subsidies anymore, and good luck buying a natural gas turbine anytime in the next 5 years because there aren't any. And so go ahead, take them away. Give us, force us to work on our cost stack can become even more efficient and even more adept at delivering low cost solar, and see how that pans out in the long run. So there's going to be some short-term pain. I don't think anybody denies that, but everybody's feeling like pretty indignant to the whole governmental policies, and a little bit bullish on just being able to do it without them. So
Well,
Well,
speaking of which, like with the tariffs, I mean, how I'm assuming you're importing some stuff from China or from East Asia. How bad are the tariffs kind of hitting you guys?
you don't notice, they come on kind of slowly, and it's hard to tell. Like, we buy a lot of Hanwha Q cells, and so they have domestic manufacturing. They've brought in
Oh,
containers and containers and containers of panels before the tariffs went into effect. But, we were paying 42 cents for panels 6 months ago, and they're going to be about 62 cents in the next month or so. So we have on that's the same panel. So you've seen, what is that, 30%, 30% price increase on panels, which is one portion of the pie. We manufacture all our structures out of aluminum, so pretty in tune with the kind of the price of aluminum at any given month, and that's fluctuated. It's somewhere around like 260, $2.60 per pound. That was as low as like 240 about a year ago, maybe a little bit lower, but over the last 10 years that we've been doing this, it's been as high as $3.30, $3.50. So the aluminum market fluctuates. I think panels, like, I have no idea, but I do imagine that some of the big manufacturers are opportunistically raising their prices for the next 6 months, while we're going to see a surge of demand for people who want to get in before the tax credit expires. And then, oh, all of a sudden, look at that. Like, we were able to reduce the cost of our panels. So, it's a game. Everybody's got to play the game. Like, you're all solar companies right now are seeing a huge surge in demand as word gets out that the tax credit's going away. So, we're part of a cooperative purchasing group called Amicus nationwide, like 80 some odd companies, all great companies. And I was just on a call with them before this, and a lot of them are fully subscribed for the year. Like, people are calling right now and they're saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, we can't guarantee that we can get you built in 2025 because they're subscribed," and that's got to be a great feeling. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but there's going to be this super awkward time period around, end of December. when you're
really?
looking at your pipeline, you're thinking, all right, like, we're not going to be able to build all these people. Some people are going to not get the tax credit, and so there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations where, it's solar companies will be bargaining with their customers, who hopefully they've been transparent with and said, like, hey, it's not a guarantee that we can get you built, but if what if we take 15% off, and we're splitting the 30% tax credit in half. You're paying 15% more and we're taking 15% off. So likely you'll see like I think you're going to see like a pretty strong surge until the end of the year, basically, when people draw the line in the sand and say they can't guarantee a tax credit, and probably a bit of a cliff starting around then, January, February. And then I anticipate a slow rebound as people like work on their costs, bring them down, try to, it's effectively a 30% price increase. So if you can offset that somewhere else in your cost stack by 30%, which is a lot, but if you can figure that out, then your value proposition's pretty much the same as it was when the tax credit existed, except you don't have these complicated conversations of, hey, give us 30 grand now, and then in 9 months you're going to get 9 grand back. Like, honestly, there's some simplicity in the whole thing of not having to rely on a tax credit. So
yeah,
we'll
and
see.
you mentioned the rates increasing for your utility. So in a way, could you just talk a little bit about the payback period for, especially, given the rate increases that are coming? I know it's with the incentives changing so much, it's a little hard to talk about it, but what would you tell customers generally about payback periods in New York City? And also, I just wonder about shading and how much sunlight gets onto these systems. Can you just talk about all that a little bit?
Sure. In New York, our average probably residential solar install is probably about a 7-year payback. So not terrible, but not like stupendous, but you're somewhere around there. So after you claim your tax credits, the system's producing $2,000-3,000 of electricity savings every year. It takes somewhere probably on average of about 7 years for a typical system. And for a lot of our systems, we're lucky to not actually have to deal with shading that much, just because on a 3-4 story row home, a lot of the times you're at or above the tree line, so the solar exposure on most of our rooftops is pretty good. If you get into, we do a lot of systems in Manhattan, and sometimes in more closer to downtown Brooklyn or other areas where there's tall buildings, and that's obviously a factor. And there are some areas where the trees are taller than the top of the roofs. So we do get shading, and it can be severe in certain instances, but the majority of our systems, I'd say 80% or so, are almost full sun exposure, like 80% or greater. And that, I just know it's a severe contrast to my days selling at Sunrun and other resi companies that are selling more in the suburbs, upstate Westchester, California, where there's just more trees, and you're talking about a single story or a 2-story home with a pitched roof. And so with a nice front yard with a big giant oak tree, and there was a lot more shading concerns. So by and large, we're fortunate to not have a ton of shading on average. And what was the third component of the question there? Offset time, shading. Was there something else that I missed?
Just, that is it getting a little harder for you to explain to customers what their benefits are going to be with all the uncertainty and the tariffs, the changing rate structures? It just seems like it's a little harder to
Yeah,
make proposition.
it is. We're used to it, I think, as an industry, because it's always been kind of topsy-turvy like that. What we still have in Con Edison and most of New York, knock on wood, is a direct 1-to-1 net metering schedule. So in New York City, we also don't have time of use like you have in California. You have both daily time of use and then tiered rates, I believe. After you use a certain amount every month, you go into a higher and higher rate schedule. In New York, you pay the same thing at 2 in the morning as you do at 6:30 in the afternoon, as you do in July, as you do in November. So it doesn't change. It's a fixed value, and we get 1-to-1 net metering, meaning if you produce a kilowatt hour of electricity that you don't use and you push back onto the grid, you get to pull that kilowatt hour back, use it at your discretion whenever you want, and they fully offset each other on a 1-to-1 basis. So that's great. I'm sure you're aware California has changed. You're on NEM 3 now. So NEM 1 was what I just described, 1-to-1. And it's gotten less and less favorable. So, I do, in that sense, we're lucky. Like, that's a very direct value proposition to the homeowner in New York City. Like, the tax credits come and go. Honestly, I think some subset of our customers don't even claim the tax credit. They say, "Oh, that's nice," and then they just totally forget and like move on with their lives. But The one-to-one net metering makes the proposition fairly straightforward. The tariffs and stuff, that's kind of on the back end. That's for us to worry about. We're going to give you a proposal that says your solar system costs $50,000. Yeah, maybe we get a little burned because we were assuming we were going to buy panels for 50 cents and now they're 60 cents or something, but we'll honor whatever we show you. And then we do just adjust on a, monthly or bi-monthly or quarterly schedule. We'll look at our pricing and say, hey, does it have to go up a little bit here, or can we reduce it a little bit here? Over the course, it's fluctuated. Panel prices used to be kind of high. They got pretty low, and now they're starting to go back up. As I said, with aluminum, it ebbs and flows. And yeah, the one consistent thing though is that people pay more and more for electricity every year. So we're some of the few people who get excited when the price of electricity goes up.
Uh, and PV panel efficiencies are pretty good right now too, right? I mean, that's been going up.
Yeah, they go up. I mean, people always ask about that. And just to put it in perspective, when we started 10 years ago, we were using 300-watt panels, and 10 years later, we're using, 430-watt panels. So that's a pretty significant increase. Now there's a tiny bit of fudge factor in there because the size of the panel has gotten, I don't know, 10% bigger too, or something like that, 10 to 15% bigger. So it's not quite 300 to 430. There's a slight manipulation because the panel size increased a little bit as well. But yeah, that's pretty good. And on your typical year, maybe from one year to the next, you might get 10-15 watt increase to the panel's capacity. So it's all about, how many watts can you fit in the same amount of square footage or square meterage. And I think you're gonna start to see it diminish a little bit. I don't think it continues at that same rate. I believe there's like a theoretical maximum that we're not too far away from, but there's people who know a lot more about that than I do. So who knows?
I want to kind of switch gears a little bit. I want to go back to the idea of like where you service and like dealing with shipping and doing modular. How is that going for you? Like what what's the kind of element of your design that makes it modular, that makes it ability, makes it so that you can then ship it, and like what else goes into it? Like once it arrives at a house, like do you have to send somebody from Brooklyn SolarWorks out to help set it up, or like can anybody just kind of do it?
Anybody could do it. So we've always been big fans of aluminum for its kind of strength to weight ratio, primarily driven by the fact that we lugged these things to the top of rooftops in New York City, and a lot of times that was just like manually done with ropes and pulleys. So, you know, a lot of the solar industry builds with steel, galvanized steel. For whatever reason, we've pledged our allegiance to aluminum, and so it does help a little bit on just kind of things being a little bit lighter. And then because we kind of designed our products with an installer's mindset, we try to make it so all the pieces kind of break down and bolt together on site so that no piece really weighs a lot more than like 50, 60 pounds. So it can be moved around. And then that's just for getting it to site. Obviously, once you get there and you start putting together like a 38-foot truss, you have to bolt these pieces together. And once it's all assembled, it can weigh enough that you'll want some special machinery to assemble the entire structure. But that's kind of been some of our um, something that makes us a little bit unique is we've always tried to keep it light and modular so that you could move it around without too much heavy equipment. And we've never really gone after like the giant carports where you bring in excavators and you're assembling everything with some special equipment. And that's awesome. Don't get me wrong, I would love to do that too, but we tend to play in the space where it's a little bit smaller. Maybe you're a smaller operation and you sub out the concrete work, and then you want to be able to assemble it by hand, so you get a scissor lift or something, and everything's pretty manageable from just kind of a weight perspective. So shipping it, the shipping industry is kind of wild. We just kind of get quotes on the spot market, and sometimes I find them to be way too cheap, and sometimes they seem expensive. But uh, I don't know. It's a little bit of a black box. I just give it to our shipping logistics guy, and he comes back with a quote, and then it gets packed up and goes wherever it goes. But in terms of the install, the goal is always to get installers, solar companies, to get familiar with the product so that they become repeat customers. And once you've done, a couple of them of the same style, they're all very similar. So you don't, it's just assembling pieces. But I'll always try to set up, if it's far away, I'll always try to set up a Zoom with whoever is going to be the head of ops on the install. We'll go over the plan set, we'll go over the installation manual, we'll go over any questions they have for 30, 45 minutes. And then, whenever the install is actually happening, I try to make myself somewhat available for the occasional phone call or FaceTime if they have any questions. But for the most part, it's pretty simple stuff. It's bolt connections. And so if you've got a little bit of building familiarity, and whoever did the concrete work actually did a good job and made them level and square, then that's half the battle right there. Then everything else goes together pretty easily.
We just wanted to wrap up. It's been great talking to you with just a look ahead in the 5 years and how you see solar canopies really working within New York City to affect people's energy production and
Yeah,
the design of their buildings.
definitely. So what the city recently, the Adams administration passed the city of Yes, which is kind of like some zoning amendments, and that opened up kind of backyards. You don't, a little bit trickier in downtown Brooklyn where it's hard to get to the backyard, but it opened up areas, in Staten and Queens and the Bronx where you might have street parking, to allow us to put ground mounted canopies on the ground, either in the front yard or the backyard. And so we've only done a couple of those, but I'm hopeful that gains some traction. So if we've maxed out your roof, you're going fully electric, you drive an EV, maybe you drive a lot, so you're really using a lot of power. We want more ability to add more capacity to the roof, to the backyard. And so I'm hopeful that we start to gain some traction there. And that's residential. So again, not so pertinent for Park Slope, but if you have a driveway and you're out in some of the areas where there's a little bit more space, we'd like to see more kind of backyard pergolas, front yard carports going in. And then just the more canopies we can get on rooftops, the more it just allows people to convert their house to electric, stop burning natural gas, and stop cooking with natural gas. And I think everybody, once they get off over the price for the transformation, will be extremely happy. I love not having any gas in my house, and equipment's so good nowadays. Heat pumps are so efficient, water heaters are so efficient that hopefully everything can kind of start working in tandem. And we've started installing smart panels as well. So Span is one of them, Leviton is another. That's just a smart electrical panel where you can see all your loads. And we're really trying to get into like the whole home electrification space. So, we'll come in, we'll obviously do the solar, we'll put in a smart electrical panel that we can measure all your circuits on. We're even starting to do HVAC, and then hopefully we can get you to change out your water heater for electric too, and your stove, and then eventually be able to offer some comprehensive reports, something that's actually useful, that says like, hey, have you checked out your hallway lighting on this floor? It seems to be left on all the time, and it's actually like a significant contributor to your overall usage. And and it's still new to us, so hopefully we can provide some good insight to people. But we'd really like to be able to package it all up and use best practices to suggest when to do your laundry, when to turn on your HVAC, the whole package. And we're big believers that electricity is the future, and we kind of want to just be in that space, providing a comprehensive whole home electrification package, especially if it's a passive house.
Especially because then your house can float. You can use, your HVAC in the morning and let it float through the rest of the day if you've got that great passive house envelope. Great. Well, it's been really nice talking with you, Galen, and appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, totally. It's been a blast. Thank you.
And that was Gaelen McKee, who is the president, the self-appointed president of Brooklyn SolarWorks. Jay, let's go to you first. What were your highlights from your conversation?
I think the biggest highlight is just how the current administration has some policies in place that are trying to make building with solar a little bit more difficult, but it's having the opposite effect, and it's apparently never been busier. So that's good news. I also just like the fact that I learned this was while the mics were off. He actually lived about a block away from me back when I was in New York. Which I
Right.
found very funny. And I was walking through Park Slope today, and you can see their canopies everywhere. They're
Yeah.
obviously doing just great business, and couldn't be happier for them.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning. I halfway through listening in, I jumped on their website to have a look at exactly what they were talking about with these canopies and the flat roofs, and they've got some great images there, and it really explains the challenge that they overcame and how that has been successful in developing these canopies, and just how much more area that opens up to being able to put solar panels around the place is really fantastic. Mary, how about you? You're on the conversation as well. What were your highlights?
Well, first of all, it was just lovely to hear, sort of echoing what Jay said, what an optimistic approach he has to the current administration policies, that it's not killing residential solar. So, because unfortunately the price of electricity is going up. But also, I just thought the whole discussion about co-ops and getting co-ops on board and getting co-op, trying to find advocates on co-op boards to make that easier, and how much effect one individual can have if
Yeah.
they become the advocate on the board for solar. So that was exciting.
Yeah.
Mm.
And Michael, it's really great to have you with us this week. You do a lot of work in New York City, and you do a lot of renovation work, retrofits of some older homes. What's your experience been with adding solar to your projects?
Well, I'm actually really happy to be on this one just because I do a lot of work with Brooklyn SolarWorks. So they're on all of our passive houses or other houses that are getting solar. And you're right, that canopy system that they have really does help with some of the setup, but also just having somebody you can go to that makes it super easy. No matter what we're doing, we are always looking for good partners who can really handle everything from soup to nuts. And solar is one of those things that's always a little technical. You've got to work with the electrician. You've got to get the right tax credits. You got to do all the sorts of things and install it well. So we've been pretty lucky to have them. As you can tell, he's pretty knowledgeable and knows kind of where to go and how to go through it. We also do a lot of landmark work, and we're still able to get these systems on the roof. So it's been really nice, especially for some of the all electric houses.
Yeah.
Makes an even bigger difference. So yeah, good stuff.
I'm interested in that architectural challenge from your perspective. Is it hard to make solar panels look good or be part of one of your projects?
Yeah, so I mean, in New York City, you've got a couple of things. One, Landmarks doesn't want to see them sometimes, so you've got to keep them tight to the roof. New York City Building Department wants you to have a 6-foot path front to back, and then you have things like skylights and other buildings and everything else. So with a flat roof, it's sometimes difficult to get the skylight you want to have. I'm sorry, to have the solar that you want to have. It's flat in the roof. Often we're doing canopies, sometimes custom design canopies. One of the things that we also like to do, and one of the things that I love about Passive House, is it frees the roof of all these mechanicals. So when I want to do a beautiful roof deck, I can actually do a canopy, and the canopy with a bifacial solar panel actually acts as a bit of a sunshade. I have one on my own house and I love it.
Yeah, yeah. And you sort of create another amenity there as well, because you
turn the challenge into an amenity.
Yeah, perfect. Which is and he mentioned that having that similar sort of experience with parking lots and putting up shade, which double. And I see that a lot happening in Australia as well. The big car park malls where they have shade for vehicles to park under, which is also generating electricity. Which I'm assuming it won't be long before that those solar panels are actually generating power for EVs that are parking underneath those solar panels, which is seems kind of nice. Zach, any thoughts from you?
Well, maybe restating what people have already said. I mean, I think you just touched on one piece of it, which is these canopy systems plus Passive House can create a situation where you're providing, on at least on a net basis, enough energy to power your home and your electric vehicle, which is exciting. And I guess the other piece is just that back to your points, Mary and Jay, about the policies and the subsidies vanishing, is that despite all of that, the price of solar has gone down by a factor of 10 in 10 years. And so there are just some immovable forces at play, regardless of bad policy. And so I think that provides some hope, even though we're clearly going to be seeing a slowing of the rate of deployment of clean energy in the near term, which is very frustrating. But the big picture is different. And as soon as you look elsewhere, like China and other places, there's massive acceleration happening. So yeah, big picture.
Yeah, well, with that drop in PV prices, the doubling of power price over the last 10 years, leading to an average payback period of 7 years now. Can only think that payback period is going to probably decrease with those trends, and it's just getting easier and easier to do. It just seems like a bit of a no-brainer. Added to the fact that if you're putting it on a passive house, you got the extra advantage of that house already having a lower demand and better resilience. So you actually don't need as many panels as you might if it wasn't such an efficient house to start with. So it's a bit of a win-win all round, really. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jay and Mary, for bringing us that conversation. And also, thanks, Michael. Great to have you on the pod this week. Zach, we've got some exciting things coming up on the accelerator.
Indeed, it is September. So tomorrow, September 3rd, we have our first Passive House Accelerator live episode of the 2025-2026 season. So we hope everyone will join us for that with a special mystery guest that you will see tomorrow when you arrive. And then also mark your calendar for Friday, September 19th. We're incredibly excited about our Reimagine Buildings Massive Impact Conference that will be held virtually. It's a half-day conference on Friday, this September 19th, and we hope you'll join us. It's an incredible program that Kim Davis has curated along with the team here at the Accelerator, and it's going to be one of our best yet.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening in, and we'll be back again next week on the Passive House Podcast.